A couple of years ago, SideFX announced a new renderer called Karma that intends to replace Mantra in the future. Karma was included in Houdini 18 as a beta, and in the latest version, Houdini 19, it's ready to be used in production. Until now, we've been setting up our crowd simulations in the OBJ context, and then we went to the out context and rendered it out with a Mantra node. With Karma, the process is a bit different. We will continue to build our simulations in the OBJ context, but when it comes to rendering, we will no longer use the out context, but rather the stage context. The stage is a context based on USD, Universal Scene Description, a format that stores, as you can guess by its name, a description of our 3D scene, the position and shape of the geometry, the animations, materials, lights, cameras. To work with USD in Houdini, we have to change our working environment. Up here we have several environments for animation, games, modeling. For USD, we will use the Solaris environment. And now let's go to the stage context, where we will build our scene. Right now our stage is empty, and that's why we don't see anything in the viewport. We have to take the simulation from the OBJ context and bring it here to the stage. We do that with the SOP import node. With the SOP path parameter, we tell Houdini what exactly we want to import. I want to import the cache of my simulation. My agents are now on the stage, which means that I'll be able to see them in the viewport. At the bottom left, we have the scene graph tree, and you'll see that there's an item called SOP import 1 in the root directory. This SOP import 1 is what we just imported with the node, our crowd simulation, the agents. If we open it, we see an item called Agent Definitions, which contains all the information of our agents, their layers, and all the shapes, and below all the agents we have in the scene. With the import path prefix parameter, we control the name that this item will have in the USD tree. By default, it's $OS, which is the name of the node. If I change it to crowd, now it will appear in the scene graph tree as crowd. This way I can identify it more easily. Now we're going to import our track as well with another SOP import node. I want to bring the terrain. Display the node, and there you go. Let me rename this node to terrain so that we can identify it in the USD tree. And now I need a merge node to combine these two items I have on the stage in my scene. Alright, the scene graph tree has now my crowd and my terrain. You may have noticed that neither the terrain nor the agents have textures. The material style sheets that we saw in previous videos will only work if we are rendering with Mantra. If we are going to use Karma, the textures must be put here in Solaris. Let's create a material library node and connect it to the output of the merge node. This node is like a container for materials. It's like the mat context where we had all the materials, but in the stage. Double click to go inside, and now we have two options. We can create the principal shaders from scratch, or if we already have them in the mat context, we can copy them with Ctrl+C and paste them into the material library with Ctrl+V. You'll see a new item called Materials in the scene graph tree that contains the three materials we copied from the mat context. Go back to the stage, and now we're going to hit this button here, Autofill Materials. This will take all the principal shaders inside the material library and add them here to the parameters. In this window, the material network is where the materials are stored. By default, it's a dot, which in Houdini language means myself, this same node. In other words, we are going to take the materials that are inside the material library. And the USD path prefix is the path where we want to put the materials within the USD tree. Accept and nothing will happen because this is still a bit buggy. I trust and hope that side effects will fix it in future versions of Houdini. If it doesn't work for you either, click on clear to delete all references to the materials. Now click again on autofill materials, accept, and you should see the materials in the scene graph tree and also in the parameters. The material VOP is the name of the material within the material library, these names here. And the material path is the name that material has in the USD tree. In this case, for example, if instead of CH36 I put here CH38, you'll see that the name of this material is now CH38. But I'm going to leave the original name, 36. How do I assign these materials to my geometry? Well, we can do it directly from the material library node. Let's start by assigning a material to the track, which in my case is this one here. And in the geometry path, I'll put the path of the object in the USD tree. In this case, I want to apply this material to the terrain, so I'll choose the terrain item and drop it here in the geometry path. Voila, the material has been applied to the track. Okay, let's go now with the agents. In the material library, look for the material of your agent, which in my case is CH36, and let's assign it to crowd. But we have a problem here. The material has been applied to all the pieces of geometry of the agents, including the bottle. How can I apply the material only to the body and not to all the layers at the same time? Well, in the scene graph tree, let's open crowd, select one of these agents, for example, agent 1, which is this one in the foreground, enter its geometry, and here are all the shapes of my agent. I'm going to select the body and drop it here in the geometry path. And now, every time you're changing materials in Solaris, keep in mind that this fails sometimes. Every time you change materials in Solaris, I recommend that you disable the node and enable it again to update the viewport and see the results. Sometimes you may be seeing things that are not really there, that it's just a bug. So again, every time you change materials, disable and enable the node to force an update. Bruh, seems like we have a problem here. The texture doesn't show up. Let me try again. This is the body of my agent and I'm going to drop it in the geometry path. It doesn't work. Let's go to the SOP import node, the one we use to import the agents. Expand the primitive definition option and we see that by default it's set to create instanced SkelRoots. Checking this agents box, we see that agents can be imported into USD in many ways. If we leave the default one, the agents will be imported as instanced SkelRoots. In other words, Houdini will use the agent definition as a template to generate all these copies or instances of the agent. This is very efficient because instead of loading the agent definition for each agent, you only do it once. But this method has a drawback, and it's that if we consider our agents as instances, we will only be able to access their surface level, meaning we will not be able to edit anything inside the agent. That's why when we applied the material to the body shape, nothing happened, because the agents were instances. The solution is to import the agents as standalone SkelRoots, not instances. This way we lose efficiency because now we have to load much more information. Note that in the scene graph tree there is no agent definition. But now we can access the agent shapes individually and apply the materials to a specific shape. Let's go back to the material library and select the body of our mannequin 1, this one here. Drag and drop it in the geometry path and now it works. The material has been applied only to my agent's body. Now, how can I apply the same material to every character in this simulation? Well, here in the parameter, instead of putting mannequin underscore 1, I'm going to put an asterisk. Voila! All my agents have now the material applied to their bodies. With this asterisk, I'm asking Houdini to consider all the items starting with mannequin underscore. And now for the bottle, I'll do the same. Look for the bottle material, select the bottle shape, and drop it here in the geometry path. Change the number 1 to an asterisk, and if you don't see any changes in the viewport, you know what to do. Turn off the node and then turn it on again.